Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Gabby and welcome to my strange little YouTube channel. Now if you are new to my channel, I just recently started a series on my channel called Identified Does, where I go over John and Jane Doe cases of people who have years later been identified. You guys seem to really like my last Identified Doe case, so I thought I would do another one. This case is a little bit different than the usual John and Jane Doe cases because this one was not ruled a homicide. Most of the time when we think of Doe cases, we think of them being murder for the most part. I know my mind usually automatically goes to that, but this one was ruled something completely different. But the main reason that I wanted to bring this one up is because it definitely gives hope to all the other Jane and John Does out there being eventually identified. This Jane Doe was unidentified for 48 years. Yes, almost 50 years, almost half a century, and she was finally identified. So with that being said, let's just get into it. The date is June 8th, 1968, and the location is Griffith Park in Los Angeles, California, right near the Los Angeles Zoo. A tiny woman with bleach blonde hair and brown eyes is slumped over a picnic table. She is wearing a red and white polka dot bikini, a light tan, almost white overcoat, dark sandals, and a wedding ring with the inscription CB to EJ 9420. This woman had no identification on her at all and was automatically pronounced deceased. The cause of death, a morphine overdose, most likely accidental. Who was this woman though? It wouldn't be known for another 48 years. Until then, she would be known as Griffith Park Jane Doe or Jane Doe number 18. In 2010, a man named Carl Koppelman came across a photo of the deceased nameless woman on the coroner's website. Carl was a moderator on Web Sleuths, which is a website dedicated to unsolved cases where people can discuss them, and many of these Web Sleuths have actually solved cases before. Many of these amateurs are pretty amazing. I mean, they do awesome work. Carl came across this photo and he was automatically drawn to her. He said that she was absolutely stunning. She was like a movie star, and he was completely baffled that she had been unidentified for so long. He decided to work on a facial reconstruction of the woman and release it on his Facebook page dedicated to cold cases, and possibly it would lead somewhere. Koppelman reconstructed this picture many times throughout the years, making sure that every single detail was perfect, even putting the iconic Hollywood sign in the background of it. A former colleague of Carl's, a woman named Rita Hood, was scrolling through Facebook on her lunch break like many of us do, and she came across this photo and was automatically drawn to it. She found a lot of this case really interesting, and the main thing that she found interesting though was the wedding band on the woman's finger. It had two initials on it, and it also had the date September 4th, 1920. And September 4th was weirdly Rita's birthday. So Rita felt like she was meant to come across this case and that she had to do anything she could to try to help it as much as possible. Rita was an amateur genealogist, so she used Ancestry.com and was on the hunt and determined to find two people who had those initials who married on that date. She looked through thousands upon thousands of records. At that time, there were only marriage records public on Ancestry from the year 1920 for 36 states, and that excluded California, so at first, Rita was a little nervous. She thought that she was definitely going to hit a dead end. Rita looked up the top 10 most popular female names from that era that started with E. She looked at those names and tried to find everybody with those names who also had the last name beginning with J, who married somebody with the initials CB on September 4th, 1920. Rita searched for weeks. Every time she got any free time during her day, she was looking at marriage records online. After 4 weeks, she found her match. Edna Lydia J., who married Charles J. Bush in Detroit on September 4th, 1920. Rita had discovered that Edna had passed away in 1932 due to a health illness, but Edna had two children with Charles Bush, one of those being Geraldine Bush or Jerry Bush, and Rita tracked down Geraldine's son, which was John Paul Manzo Jr., and John Paul Manzo Jr. got back to Rita on September 11th. He verified that Edna was his grandmother and Geraldine was his mother and that she passed away in 2014. Rita asked him who might have his grandmother's wedding band because they found a Jane Doe possessing it. And John replied with 2 words, "Call me." John was so insanely nervous. I mean, you can't blame him. Anyone would be. He was basically shaking at this point that he actually sent the wrong number to Rita at first, like by mistake, and he had to end up calling her. And about 1 minute into their conversation, he got right to the point and he said, "My sister has been missing since 1968. When was your Jane Doe found?" And Rita replied with June 8th, 1968. They had their girl. Griffith Park Jane Doe, or Jane Doe number 18, was Cheryl Ann McMillan, and she was 21 years old. Identified in September of 2016. John said that he was 6 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was 15 years older than him. He doesn't really remember much about her, but he said that she was an amazing big sister, and she always showed him tons of love every time they were together. Cheryl was from his mother's first marriage, and after she graduated from Campbell High School in Campbell, California in 1964, she left to Los Angeles and basically cut off all connection with her family. They actually hired a private investigator to go find her. When this private investigator tracked her down, she told him, "Leave me alone. Tell them I'm fine." A little bit later, Cheryl went down a really bad path very quickly, and she got entangled in drugs, and it was basically all because of a man she was seeing with the last name Miller. In the time leading up to her death, she was basically a drug mule, and she was bringing drugs back and forth from Mexico. Cheryl was supposed to be the maid of honor in her cousin Ellen's wedding, which was on June 22nd, weirdly my birthday. But she was supposed to be the maid of honor, and she never showed up, and Ellen never heard from her again. John told Rita that his family never stopped wondering what happened to Cheryl, but they just figured that she wanted to live a new life and start fresh, and that's what she was doing all these years. He said that they never thought to look for Jane Does. Now, back in 1968, the technology was nowhere near where it is today, so they didn't collect any DNA from the body, and she was cremated not long after they discovered her. So there was really no way to compare DNA from the body to one of the family members, but Detective Mario Santana went and interviewed all of her family members in 3 different states, and he looked through photos and letters and collected any bit of information that they had regarding her, from physical characteristics like birthmarks and moles. And by the end of all his interviews, he said that there was no doubt in his mind that Jane Doe number 18 was Cheryl Ann McMillan. Cheryl's cousin Cindy, who was the same age as Cheryl, said that just in 2016, a year before they found out what actually happened to her, that she got rid of all the letters she had from her cousin because it was just too hard to look at them anymore. She said that the news was bittersweet, but she's happy that the case is solved. It's really heartbreaking to her that Cheryl is gone forever. John stated that when Cheryl left, he definitely thought she just decided to leave them all forever, and for his entire life, it really affected him. He had trouble getting really close to people because he always was terrified that they were just going to leave him one day, and now he has a totally different perspective. According to John, Cheryl was in Los Angeles because she had a scholarship to UCLA, and she was working at Disneyland. This Mr. Miller character, whoever he was, whoever she was seeing, was never tracked down, still to this day. But of course, when you think about it, even though he was seeing her at the time, he wouldn't put in a police report because he was involved in some really illegal activity, so he definitely wasn't going to contact police in any way at all. Their cousin Ellen actually met this Mr. Miller when she visited Cheryl in Los Angeles, and she said that they went to the beach and Mr. Miller was there and all of his friends, and she said that this was just not a good group of people for Cheryl to be around. She was not fond of them, and she made it known to Cheryl, but Cheryl just acted like she absolutely loved this group of people. In 2017, after Ellen found out about Cheryl's horrible fate, she said that she just wishes that she could have done something. Maybe if she stayed in Los Angeles longer, she would have been able to help her. And I think that's a lot of people's responses when it comes to somebody they love passing away from either drugs or suicide. You kind of always wish that you could have done anything to prevent it. John said that it is completely devastating the path that Cheryl went down, but it means a lot to him that she never went and pawned her grandmother's ring, because if it wasn't for that ring, if she did not have that ring on when she passed away, she would have never probably ever been identified, and this case would remain unsolved forever. But now at least Jane Doe number 18, or Griffith Park Jane Doe, has her name back. This case was one that as soon as I came across, I knew I was going to do a video on, because almost half a century went by and this woman was unidentified. It is just, it's like insane to me. It is really heartbreaking that her family never knew what happened to her. Like, her mother passed away and had no idea what happened to her daughter, and that is just, it's crazy how life can turn out that way. This case right here in my mind is a perfect example of why people should not give up on these cases. So many people think, well, you know, X amount of years went by, there's no way it's going to be solved. It's not impossible. Half a century went by and this woman was finally identified because the right people and the right amount of information came together on Facebook. When it comes to John and Jane Doe cases, unless their death is already figured out, like it's something apparent and it's not homicide, there's usually a two-step process, and that's 1, identify the person, and then 2, try to find the people who may have been responsible. And there's so many cases out there where the people have finally been identified after so many years, and now it's just time to try to find out what happened to them, and that's kind of the reasoning behind this series on my channel. Definitely let me know down below in the comments if you're a person who is into John and Jane Doe cases, and there's some John and Jane Doe cases out there where they have been identified. Definitely let me know those cases down below, because I would love to cover them in this series. And I love you guys so much. Make sure to comment and like and subscribe if you're not already, because it really, really helps your girl out and helps get the word out about these cases even more. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys. Life is so long,